Howdy folks, GameSmith here, so I thought I'd show you the latest project I've been working on. So this is a game that I've been calling the Frontiersmen. So I did this as part of the Open Game Art Spring 2023 Game Jam, as well as the Game Develop Month Game Jam. They stacked up within just a few hours of each other for kickoff and when they wound down, and so I ended up doing kind of a double jam entry and utilized kind of the strengths of both jams to kind of work on this project. So as part of the Open Game Art Jam, I had to use so many assets that I found on opengameart.org. So I've got it muted right now, but here in a bit I'll do a walkthrough without me talking, so you can hear a lot of the audio assets that I found. So we've got a lot of nature sounds and stuff like that I was able to find on the site, as well as some low poly animals and stuff. So we'll see if we can catch it flying by at some point. There's a low poly crow that I found on Open Game Art that I paired with some crow calls and stuff just to kind of build that kind of immersive atmosphere. And then for Game Develop Month, the challenge with its theme was gathering, and then Open Game Art's theme was Green Man. So kind of like your classic like Wood Woses or your Man of the Woods. And so that's what kind of putting those two themes together is kind of what sparked this idea. So I'm looking for, a wood woodsman type character or Man of the Woods and gathering. And so that leads into the gameplay of this game, or the Frontiersmen, where you go around and you set traps and you try to capture animals. So I was kind of going, there's the crow there. So like I said, I've got the game audio paused right now while I'm talking, but I'll do a walkthrough here in a bit with the audio soundscape and stuff turned on. But yeah, so the idea is, it's kind of that early American colony period, kind of Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, like long hunters just going over the Appalachian Mountains to the Cumberland Gap, kind of that sort of time period. So just to show you some of the stuff I worked on during the jams and some of the stuff that I didn't get finished, we'll go up here to old Benjamin and talk to him. So when we talk to him, he'll give us some traps that we can use and kind of gives us a warning, that we need to hurry up and set the trap so we can leave the next day. So part of this was I was busy at work, and so I didn't get as much time as I wanted to really dig into this game concept. So this is kind of my way of cheating a little bit. So we can go and we can set the traps, but then when we're done, we need to go back and sleep in the sleeping mat or sleeping bedroll, and then that's what triggers the in-game state. So there's not multiple days of playing the game. It's kind of like you get one day to kind of explore, set your traps, go to sleep, and then the game just kind of ends at this point. So I have the very basics of the game loop in, but I don't have it where you can trap for multiple days and decide, do you want to push your luck? Do you want to stay a little longer? Maybe there's no supply management in this early version of the game. Because like any game jam, I had way more ideas than I had time to do, especially with busy at my day job. I had to kind of triage, and I was joking with my students at the college because they participated in the same game jam. Because I'm a fan of eating my own dog food, so they had to participate in the Game Develop Month as part of their capstone class. And so I made a game, kind of in the trenches there with them, doing the same kind of stuff I'm expecting from them. But about halfway through, I was joking with them, it's time to take out the mechanics machete and start cutting out the pieces that you're not going to have time for. So my original conception of this game, and that it's something I'm still trying to work towards, as I keep working on it after these jams, is I was really wanting that kind of, I'm blanking on games that use it, kind of the Tetris style inventory. So like the older Resident Evil games, Dredge, the New Oregon Trail, like that style where you have to kind of like rotate and fit items into your inventory. And I wanted to mix that with like kind of the sensibilities of like old school like BX D&D, where you had a limited amount of inventory. Another mechanic I had to get rid of fairly early on was just a day-night cycle. So that was going to regulate like how often you would go out and set your traps, and then you would go check them and then decide, okay, how many days do I want to push my luck? Because as we go through the dialogue here in a bit, kind of warns you that you're not necessarily there with permission from the local tribes. So, if you look at historical accounts, there was a lot of times where Indian tribes would find trappers on their land. Best case, they would take their furs away from them and send them on. Worst case, you just kind of disappear in the woods and you don't come home. So that's trying to put a little bit of that historical flavor in to also kind of hide the fact that, there's not multiple days of trapping and stuff. So Benjamin here's giving us our traps. So let's go ahead and take a look at them. So here's one of the other things I discovered during the jam. So if I put a trap here and I open it, one of the problems I ran into is, if you notice, the spring arms on the traps do not depress like they should. I had that working and animating really well using some rig or some bones in a rig in Blender, but I did not realize in the newer versions of Blender, because it's been a while since I've done rigging and animating in Blender, that when I export it, since the spring arms were a part of the rig, but the rest of the elements, like the jaws and the pan and the dog and all of that, were just animated objects, it actually busts those out into multiple animations, and I didn't have a real simple way to merge all of that back together in Godot. So I've been using, this is my first real project using Godot 4 since it's come out. That was one of my other excuses, was to try out some of the new features in Godot 4. So at a later date, I will go back and I will just rig this entire trap as one single armature with bones for the jaws and the pan and the dog and all of that for when you set it, and have the spring compression. But that was one of the issues I ran into. And you can't actually step on them and they'll trigger. And like I said, I'll do a little demo here at the end with all the sound enabled. But yeah, so we just want to go around and set some traps. And so one of the ways that this works, and again, this is something that I ran out of time to do, is, there's some environmental clues to show you kind of like where different animals are. But I ran out of time to put a lot of the models that I found on Open Game Art and stuff for some of the low poly animal models. Not all of them were rigged. And so again, under that time compression from being at basically the busiest time of year at work, I did not get a chance to go back and rig all of the animals and stuff. So that's something I would like to do in a future iteration of this game, is rig the models. There's a few animals I did not have models for, so I've got kind of a block out of a beaver's dam and lodge here, but I couldn't find a good low poly beaver. I found some really good like foxes and rabbits and stuff like that. So if we just kind of run around the environment, we can set different ones. And the way that it currently works is when you go to sleep, as long as you've placed traps somewhere close to a den, you will catch certain types of animals. So there's basically just giant colliders in parts of the level that kind of work as like, oh, this is the fox region, this is the beaver region, this is the rabbit region. So if you set traps in the appropriate spots, you'll catch them. But right now, there's not a real good feedback to the player of like, where are these spots and stuff. So that's one of the things I would like to change in a future version. Oh, stepped on my own trap. Let's get off that. One of the other things I did add in, just for a little bit of extra, is there are mushrooms you can pick up. So we can pick up some brown mushrooms just as a simple, collectible. I wanted to have a little bit more of the gathering theme kind of built in. So let's see. So we've placed all our traps. So if we run back over here now and we go to sleep, we'll see how we did on our trapping. There were just a few other small things. Like one of the things that I ran into is, since I was not making all of the game art bespoke from scratch, which is an interesting experience for me, because normally when I make games, I tend to do most of it myself. So, that's one of the things I really enjoyed about the Open Game Art Jam, is it really forced me to kind of go out and find good quality assets. And if you've not looked at opengameart.org, I highly recommend it. Go check it out and look through some of the stuff they've got available. You can filter by license type. So even though I did the jam and I was using Creative Commons 0 or like by attribution license, part of the jam requirements is all assets that you use from Open Game Art you have to provide credit for, which I'm completely fine with. Like I said, it's really good assets, so I was able to use those. And then the other assets I used, there was a Humble Bundle running during the same period for a lot of the low poly Cinti assets. So I went through and I've used a lot of those, but that's where I ran into some issues. Cinti's assets are great, but they do not currently have them set up for Godot. So if you use Unity or Unreal, work perfectly fine. You've got either for Unity, there's just a project or a package you import. For Unreal, I think they've got like a U project you can use. It opens up your prefabs or your preset actors are already created. No issues. in Godot, you have to grab the source files and manually set them up. And one of the big problems is, for some reason, and I've not been able to figure out a way to make it go faster, when you open the files, the source files, into Godot, they do not bring their texture paths in correctly. So I had to sit there and do a lot of, like one model at a time, set up its texture path overrides, make sure it was scaled properly, set up the collisions if they didn't have it, all of this kind of stuff. And so it took me a lot of the time that I did have free, I spent getting a lot of the models and different assets in. Now, I have seen some interesting projects from Godot developers. There is a Unido importer, I think is what it's called. I was not familiar with it, but it's designed to kind of help, pull like Unity packages and stuff into Godot and set them up. And then there's another one, and I'm blanking on its name. It just got announced earlier this week or last week. I saw it on Twitter. I think Games from Scratch has talked about it in one of his videos this week. But it's another third-party tool that lets you pull in, assets from Unity and other engines into Godot. So I think between the two of them, I probably could have shaved, I don't know, man, probably 8-10 hours off of the time I spent getting all these models in, because I was actually having to open the Unity version of the projects to figure out which parts of different models, what like texture or material they were using, then recreate that material in Godot and put the right textures in. And it wasn't always a one-to-one conversion because of the differences in the shaders and stuff. So just a lot of my time, even though the Cinti packs saved me a ton of time on modeling, it still took up a lot of time getting it to work in Godot that I probably wouldn't have had the issue if I would have just used Unity or Unreal instead. But like I said, this was my excuse to learn Godot 4, and I think that process is a lot less painful now. I haven't tried it yet, but I think I could shave off a lot of time using some of those assets just from what I've seen and stuff. Yeah, so let's go ahead and go to sleep. I'll show you kind of the end game state. And so you can see here, I did get a chance to use some of the low poly models for the animals. Like I said, I could not find a beaver once. That's why there's just kind of a placeholder image here. But it looks like we placed enough traps in enough places that we caught 3 foxes, 1 beaver, and no rabbits. So again, it doesn't have that chance kind of percentage that I was wanting, because originally I was wanting it to be more like, oh, not only are you within an animal's region, but like you're along a game trail or you're near a water source, a little more complexity to it. One of the other mechanics I cut out that I'd like to get in at some point is a proper like hunger, sleep, thirst mechanic. I'm trying to really push that, not necessarily survivalism, but this is the first time that, a lot of European settlers crossed over the Appalachian Mountains and entered into like what were for them unexplored territory. And so I want to kind of have more of that, like, did you bring enough stuff? Like I said, that old Oregon Trail kind of feel, like, did you properly prepare for your journey before you left? And then once you get there, and you could spend days setting traps and collecting pelts and having to process them and things like that, do you have enough room to carry out everything that you've captured? More of that kind of, I don't want it to be fiddly, like inventory management just for, being, just for complexity's sake, but I think that would really kind of reinforce the overall theme and feel that I wanted to go for. So again, this is a very, very early kind of alpha version of it. Did not get to put a ton of time into it, but I'm really kind of happy with where it turned up as a first pass. Like, yeah, here's the title screen. So if we hop into the credits, we can see all the assets and stuff that, like I said, I found on Open Game Art, and got some title screen music from Kevin MacLeod and then Computech. So yeah, there's a lot of great assets and stuff on Open Game Art and places like that. And again, if you ever use work, even if it's stuff that's Creative Commons 0, it's always a good rule of thumb just to provide attribution. It doesn't cost you anything but a little bit of time to add it to your list of credits. But it's just a really good way to to show where you've got some of the work that helped you. So what I'm planning on doing now is, like I said, I want to do another iteration on this. And I'm going to steal a page from Jeff Vogel's playbook, from Spiderweb Software. I'm going to try to find the worst 25% of the game and improve that. So there's a little bit of Uh, we'll be generous and call it game jam code holding parts of this together. So I built up a little bit of technical debt trying to just get something playable. But now that I have a playable version, I'd like to go back and make a little more robust code in places to make it run a little better. You know, a little less like bubblegum and shoestring code holding pieces of this together. Broke some kind of cardinal rules of Godot development on like when you should get children of things and when you should broadcast up and you know, and step into children down. You know, towards the end when I was running out of time, I just kind of made it work instead of, you know, worrying about like proper code architecture in a few places. So, and there's a lot of it's just placeholders. So I'd like to go back and just fix a lot of. Like I said, I don't really have any real UI to speak of. The dialogue system, I'd like to move to a more extensible dialogue system. So, like right now, we've got the traps. We talk to Benjamin again. He'll give us a different message. If we go out and set some traps, if we just drop a few of them and come back, I think he's got a slightly different message. And then if we set all of them, he should tell us to go get some sleep. So again, that's done in a very clunky way. So I'd like to use something maybe like Dialogic or some of the other great like UI or dialogue managers for Godot. It's got to find one that works with Godot 4 and that I can either use with C# or put a C# wrapper around. That's the other kind of challenge I did is I'm doing all of this purely in C#. That's kind of my preferred programming language. Nothing against GDScript. I think what GDScript does is great. And a lot of my students really like GDScript, especially the new changes in 4. But just me personally, coming from several years of experience in Unity and even back in old like XNA and Monogame, you know, I really like C# just as a language. So I know it's a little more verbose as far as the number of lines of code and stuff like that. But, you know, it's just the kind of my preferred method. I'm always more of a kind of a C-based, you know, language pattern over something that's more like Python-esque. You know, like I said, my first language was Java, so C# and Java are basically kissing cousins program language wise. So that's why I kind of like that style. It's more familiar to me than you know, like I said, Python or Lua or that, you know, that kind of different, you know, more interpreted style of language. All right, well, I'm going to stop talking here for a little bit and just play through the game with the audio on, and then I will hop in at the end and show you what I'm going to be doing here in the next little while, and then just give you guys an idea of kind of like where the development's going and what the next step is. Alright, so if you're interested in trying out the game, I have it uploaded to both itch.io and GameJolt, so you can go and grab a copy at either site. It is currently built for Windows, Mac, and Linux, so it supports all three major PC platforms, and the game is free right now. Since this is just a game jam kind of MVP version, there's no cost to download it, so I will put links to both the itch.io and GameJolt pages. That way, depending on which site you prefer, you can go and grab a copy and try it out. What my current plans are now, after showing you kind of like where the current state is after doing the first kind of dual jam, is I found a couple other game jams on itch that are going on right now that are kind of the perfect type of jams to keep working on this game. So the first one I ran across was the Improve My Game Jam 27. So this is a bi-monthly jam that's geared towards taking an existing game and just improving and adding more features and developing on it. And then the other one that I ran across was the 32-bit Spring Cleaning 2023 jam. So this one is just in looks like 3 days. So it is currently May the 27th of 2023 right now as I'm recording this. But this jam is kind of geared towards more of the old like PS1 N64 style. And so while my gameplay is I'm not gonna necessarily limit it to like the console limitations of the time. I'm not gonna do like triplanar material effects and having to do everything with like vertex colors and stuff like that. My style that I really want to do this game in is kind of that low poly style. That's why I really like those Cinti assets when they were doing the Humble bundle. It really fit the kind of style that I was going for. So there's a fairly good Venn diagram overlap between what I want for my game and I think the goal of this jam. I'm just not going to necessarily hardcore limit myself to PS1 limitations or N64 limitations and stuff. So I'm going to do it, like I said, I'm going to do another dual jam. If you want to go and try out the games, I highly recommend you look at these. I noticed on Improve My Game Jam, they've already had a few submissions. So they've got 66 joined and 4 submissions already. And this is the one that ends in a little over 5 days. And then the 32-bit jam has 92 joined. And it doesn't look like anybody's submitted yet. So everybody's probably kind of polishing up to the end. So I'm going to spend the next 3 days or so working on, improving my game a little bit. Like I said, I don't think I'm going to get, I know I'm not going to get like the complex inventory, hunger, sleep, thirst, day-night cycle. That stuff I know I'm not going to have time to get in the next 3 days. What I'm going to shoot for is I want to do some actual custom modeling myself. So I'm going to try to model out the low poly beaver that I need. I'm going to try to rig all the low poly animals and get some basic animations and some basic AI with, nav mesh and stuff like that. So as the hunter, you can walk around and actually see the animals in the environment, and then they'll like run away from you to their den. That way you've got kind of a better idea as a player where to set your traps. One of the other big feedback that I got from the last jam is that the controls are not super apparent. I never really put in anywhere on how to control it. So I'm going to go back and, put in like, use the E key to activate. Or one of my other goals that I think I can pull off is I want to get the input system working to where a player could play the game using a gamepad. So if you want to use like an Xbox or PlayStation or even like a Switch Pro type controller, that it would work with that and then be context sensitive. So if the game's detecting you're using keyboard and mouse, it'd be like, E to place a trap on the ground. But if you're on, say, like an Xbox controller, it'd be like, use the A button to activate and place a trap on the ground. That kind of thing. And maybe controller remapping if I have time. That's always a good kind of early thing to build in, not just for player convenience, but it also helps out a lot with accessibility, so that players that cannot use standard setup for whatever reason have better options for being able to remap controls and things like that. So those are things I want to kind of tackle early on, as I'm also adding on to the core game loop and stuff. So that's going to kind of be my goal. Controller input, remappable controls, modeled out low poly beaver, rig and animate the beaver, the fox, and the rabbit, and then have some basic nav mesh, wander around the map and then run away from the player when you get so close to them type thing, and have them disappear down like a rabbit hole or a fox den or into the beaver lodge, and then maybe have them come out again after so long. That might be the part I cut for time. It might just be like, there was the fox and you scared him, he's just gone now. because I don't think I'm going to get the multi-day mechanic in yet. That'd probably be better to wait for the day-night cycle. If I have more time, I might look at something like Dialogic or one of the other Godot dialogue systems, just so I can get a more robust and extensible dialogue system in the game besides my janky, game jam version. There's a lot of stuff in the game that right now we could generously call it game jam code. The more proper term is technical debt. There's a lot of janky, like bubblegum and shoestring code in there, getting things done for the jam that I'd like to spend a little bit of time to go back. And again, stealing the page out of Jeff Vogel's playbook, go fix the worst 25% of the current version of the game for the next iteration and stuff. So if you're interested in trying out the game or just seeing, what happens development-wise, like I said, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring here in a minute. I don't think I'm currently logged in, so I'll do it once I'm done with the video. But I'll go join the jams, and then, like I said, they'll wrap up. I'll probably have to submit here in 3 days, just because I imagine the 32-bit jam, since it's been running so long, probably has a fairly hard end date. But then I'll use the feedback that comes out of this jam, or these two jams, and I'll add it to the feedback from the first two. So when the other jams wrapped up, I took all the feedback that all the different playtesters and the people that tried the game gave me, and I put it inside of a Codex project board as just kind of a rough game design document. So that's one of the things that I did differently than I normally would on the game jam version this last time, is I didn't get into any real nitty gritty like development or pre-production. I kind of just worked on whatever I felt like and whatever I had time to fit in my schedule, honestly, during the day. Because like I said, this is kind of, I'm just on the other side of the busiest time of year, roughly, at work. So now that I'm entering over the summer and I don't have any classes that I'm teaching, I should have a lot more time. So probably when I get to the other side of these two jams, I'll take all the feedback from these, roll it into that game design document, and then I'll probably make another project in Codex to actually function as my, my agile, backlog. I use kind of a Scrum Kanban mix. So I use Scrum for my period to work on, but I like the work in progress limits and the flow of work from Kanban. So I do kind of a Scrum Bond mix, but I'm going to actually detail out actionable user stories or product backlog items, so that when I'm working on the game, I have, this is what I want. Here's my acceptance criteria and my task that I need to complete. That gives me a very kind of solid definition of done. That way, I enjoyed kind of being loosey-goosey this last time just because it was for fun. But like I said, I'm not to the point where I'm done with this project. I'm actually even considering maybe developing this fully into a commercial project down the line. Right now, I'm still going to kind of just have fun with it with the game jam stuff. But now that I'm getting a little more breathing room and can actually do some real project work over the summer, I'm tempted to see where this is at by the end of it. So there's a chance this may head into an actual commercial, release territory in the future possibly. But for now, like I said, it's just going to be a game jam. I'll put up, for every game jams that I do manage to work on this in, I'll put up versions on both itch.io and Game Jolt, so like the current versions. I'll go back and tag these as like the Game Develop Month, Open Game Art, Spring 2023 jam versions. And then when I finish up the Improve My Game Jam and the 32-bit Spring Cleaning Jam, I'll just have another set of files on Game Jolt and on itch.io. That way, if somebody wants to go back and see the earlier versions of them, they would still be available for people to go back and look at and stuff. So it's not going to go behind a paywall or have a price tag on it anytime soon. But it's something I'm mulling around in my head as something I may work towards with this project. So like I said, I've had a lot of fun working on it. It was fun being in the same game jam as my students. Like I said, I'm a proponent of eating my own dog food, so there was a requirement for them as part of the capstone class. So, like I said, it's fun being in the trenches and, walking them through the development process and the management process, backlogs, user stories, calculating velocity, all of what's probably considered by a lot of people to be the less sexy side of game development, but it also tends to help you ship on time and make sure you're staying on task. Probably would have been a little further along during my limited time if I would have done that on this last one, but like I said, every once in a while it's nice to let your hair down and not have to do the normal process and just have fun. So, I've done my crazy coloring outside the lines rough out of it. So now I'm going to start going back and tightening it up and cleaning it up a little bit. But if you're interested to see where it goes, like I said, I'll probably post an update video next week. And if you've got time, I highly recommend you go and check out the submissions for the jams. Like I said, Improve My Game's already got some submissions. And I'll put links in the description below, not only of the Itch and Game Jolt pages, but I'll link to the previous jams and to these new ones. That way, if you're running across this video later, there was a lot of really fun games turned in for the Open Game Art and the Game Dev Month, or Game Develop Month jams that you guys should go take a look at. There was a lot of really just interesting and unique games developed for both jams. That'd be worth, if you're bored and trying to figure out a game to play, or you just want to see something interesting, there's a lot of really neat ones to go and try out. Well, thanks for joining me. Like I said, if you want to keep up with what's going on, I'll be posting more stuff as we go. I'll have my socials down in the description as well. So if you want to follow on Twitter or Minds or anything like that, you can go and see kind of screenshots and GIFs as I work on it. And then, like I said, I will probably put out another video probably in a week or so once I survive the other side of these jams, since I'm kind of getting into them a little late, and just show kind of what I've got done. We'll see how much of those items I get ticked off the list, and then I'll talk about some of the feedback I received from these jams. And if anybody's interested, if you guys want to see me set up the actual like Codex project backlog and show how I use it and kind of how I structure the development process and stuff, just leave a comment below, and I'd be more than willing to go and do kind of a how-to video. So taking all of my loose, stream of thought kind of notes that I did from the feedback and from play testing and talking, some of my students went and played through the game and stuff and got feedback from them. So, if you want to see how I take all of that from just kind of back of the napkin notes and put it into a more formal kind of game development, project backlog in Codex, I can show that to you guys. And remember, the tools don't matter. If you don't have access to Codex, but use something like Trello or Millinode or something like that, as long as you understand the basics of how to structure a backlog, how to come up with a user story, how to give it, some kind of story point value or effort value, I've done it in an Excel file before, when I first learned how to do it several years ago. So, there's a lot of ways you could apply these techniques regardless of what tool of choice you're using. All right, well, I think I've rambled on enough. So, like I said, thanks for joining me, and I will see you guys next time.